Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and lead economist. I'll be giving you a shipper econ update shortly. But first, we're going to go to Zach Strickland with Carrier Update, brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to your Wednesday Carrier Update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Zach Strickland. Continuing to watch our tender rejections and tender volume index flatline this week, as we're really kind of middling as we enter the end of the month. September, again, end of the month, end of quarter. We normally see a little bit of a surge at the end of the month as shippers push freight, but we have been in a superheated market already. Just how much do they have left in the tank? They still have plenty apparently, but not enough to maybe create another little bulge here towards the end of the week, end of the month, next week. As we close out September, tender rejection rates bumping up a little bit to 24.98%, up slightly from yesterday's value, and tender volumes also up slightly from yesterday's value, really kind of just plateauing right now as we approach the end of September. Looking at our country, seeing where things are moving right now, this is our volatility chart. So the most volatile markets, but I have it listed here by the largest to smallest markets. The top 5 markets in the United States right now really seeing more decline than they are increase. So we've got Ontario, California leading the way at a 4.74% market share value, well above Atlanta at 4.02%. Of course, Los Angeles is sitting right there at 3.3%, just over 8% of the total outbound volumes in the United States coming out of Southern California right now, really the strongest area of the country. But we see down through here in the Northeast, we got Harrisburg, Elizabeth, New Jersey, both showing strong decreases in their outbound tender rejection index. So the Northeast continues to stabilize. Any of those reds on the map are basically tender rejection rates that are showing strong declines and above. So moderate to strong declines and above. You've got Phoenix and Arizona down there, El Paso, Dallas, Fort Worth markets right around there, all showing significant declines in tender rejection rates week over week. So these are going to be markets that you may be seeing a little bit less spot market activity. Don't rely on them as much, even though the entire market is still very tight at 25% tender rejection rate. We're just seeing these markets start to cool off a little bit. Now, there is an equal and opposite reaction, obviously, because we are flatlining. So look at those green markets up there in the Pacific Northwest and down there around the Houston market, where we just had significant flooding event around Houston. Maybe not as easy to traverse as it was a few days ago, but the Northwest having its seasonal spike right now in September should continue through October, November to an extent, as we do see a lot more activity up there. So tender rejection rates really starting to increase up there. Looking at our weighted rejection index just to see where, where's the volume and the tender rejection rate increase having the impact. Again, Harrisburg and Elizabeth, New Jersey in the dark red, significant decline week over week. Dallas, Fort Worth, a lot of congruency here, but you do see a little bit, that Ontario and Los Angeles market, as well as Salt Lake City and Green Bay, Wisconsin, leading the way in terms of a significant increase in tender rejections combined with volume. Certainly an area of the country that you'd want to pay attention to if you're running into there without a backhaul market or a backhaul load. Houston, Texas, the hurricane or the tropical storm showing some signs of increasing rejection rates, not necessarily a strong amount, and it's really hard to tell if this had anything to do with the hurricane or not. We do know that it is harder to travel around there right now. Volumes remaining relatively flat right now, so Houston still a stronger market than it was this time last week, so definitely a place to watch out for in terms of being safe as well. Looking at the Northeast, the other significant volatile area of the country right now, Harrisburg and Elizabeth, New Jersey. I've got Elizabeth, New Jersey pulled up right here. The strongest amount of volumes coming out of Elizabeth, city volumes. Those are going to be your local moves that are less than 100 miles or so. A lot of that freight up there is your local freight that's just moving down the street back and forth. But long haul freight did take an increase yesterday, showing the second highest amount of volumes. But you do see over here on the tender rejections for both Harrisburg and Elizabeth, both showing significant declines in tender rejection rate. However, they are still very high. One is over 28%, the other is over 30%. Again, continuing to be very strong markets moving into the end of the September. And that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Hello and welcome to the Shipper Econ Update. I'm the lead economist here at FreightWaves, Anthony Smith, and today we're going to pick up a little bit where we left off last time and get into some of the housing and construction updates. And so behind me, this might look familiar, this is construction spending in orange with our flatbed outbound tender rejection in purple. And so what we can see is that there has been some downward movement as of late in construction spending for residential, but this is indeed the largest segment of construction spending overall. When we look at construction spending, it's broken down into private and public, and within private, residential is the largest. Of course, you have things like office, parks, recreation, things like that can make up some of the public side. But when we're looking at public, the biggest area that's going to really be of prominence for any type of activity is going to be highway and street production usually. But when we're looking at the largest segment within private is going to be residential, and we can see some upward movement here within residential, and this upward movement is likely to increase as we're starting to see more and more activity within housing starts, which we'll get into here shortly. But as it pertains to flatbed outbound to the rejection index, that's the capacity for these flatbed trailer types. And when we're looking at the flatbed trailer types, of course, we always talk about how manufacturing plays a role, but this time we're also going to talk to how housing, building products also play a role into transportation and some of that flatbed capacity and some of the other implications that this has for transportation. So talking about some of the other implications this has for transportations, we have retail sales year-over-year change in purple here, but this is for furniture and related products. So we're looking at sofas, couches, tables, things like that. And in orange, we have single-family sales, home sales, single-family starts for the U.S. in orange. And so we can see is that there's a pretty good correlation, of course, that both of those dips coming from COVID-19, but there are downward streams impacts when we're looking at housing starts and we're looking at new home sales. When people typically buy these new homes, when they usually have existing homes, which we'll talk to a little bit later here shortly, they typically fill these homes up with new furniture, with new tables, with new appliances. And so this also has an impact with freight and things that get loaded and hauled throughout the country. And so when we're looking at housing starts, it doesn't just end at these goods being transported throughout the country from building products materials like lumber and framing materials like that on flatbed. There are also implications for that as these new homes get filled with new furniture, new electronics, new appliances as well. Talking to some of the aspects of within housing starts, we have housing starts here within the purple line, and what we have in the green line, is the flatbed outbound tender rejection again. And so in the purple line, we can see that there's been a downward movement in housing starts. So this downward movement is something that is, I think a lot of analysts and economists were a little bit surprised by this subtle decline. But I don't think it's too surprising as we had some pretty significant rises the month before, over 20% when we're looking at overall housing starts. So I don't think it's too much to be surprised by seeing that this decline on a month-to-month basis is still up on a year-over-year basis when we're looking at overall housing starts. So when we break down overall housing starts, we have to look at what's happening within the overall industry or the overall measure. And so what we look at within the overall housing starts is that there was a decline within multifamily units, which took a big chunk out of overall housing starts, while single-family starts were pretty much still kind of coasting up and along. And so we can see that here, single-family housing starts in the green line still kind of coasting upwards, while we have multifamily units downward movement. So there was some downward movement within multifamily starts that brought down the overall measure. Although single-family sales are going to make up the bulk of overall starts. The other region that really kind of struggled within the last month of data was in the Northeast. And so that's really what's going to be impacting overall housing starts. The other big thing to note was within existing home sales. When we look at existing home sales, that was an area that really grew expeditiously on a year-over-year basis. And so, but we can see that there is still some upward movement here when we're looking at permits on the overall measure for housing starts. But that's going to do for your update, your economic update for housing, construction, and the shipper update. And that's also going to do for this episode of FreightWaves Now. Thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to check out all of your favorite streaming platforms for FreightWaves TV app. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.